In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Odoo versus NetSuite, two of the most popular ERP products currently on the market, and weighing their relative strengths and weaknesses. And to do a full and proper analysis, later in this video, I'm going to be bringing on Andrew from Odoo It Yourself, which is the #1 Odoo YouTube channel currently. Welcome back, guys. My name is Chris, and I teach people how to use ERP software. But in this video, we're not going to be diving into how to use the software, but more which software should you be choosing. And again, specifically looking at Odoo versus NetSuite. And the first question you should be asking yourself is what they have in common. So let's go through that first. So #1, they are both ERP systems. That is pretty self-evident. If you don't know what ERP stands for, it is Enterprise Resource Planning, and it really just means one software that can handle all the core aspects of your business. So whether it's accounting, inventory management, sales and CRM, potentially manufacturing, any different part of your business can be handled with an ERP system like Odoo or NetSuite. So that is one core thing they have in common. And another aspect of that is the fact that, and this is different than some other ERPs, they are both very modular. So while you do have a core system, if you want to add in, let's say, a marketing feature or inventory management, that's something that you get as a separate module that you then kind of plug in or enable for the system. And then the third thing they have in common is the fact that they are both ERP products in the tier of small to mid-sized businesses. So when you're looking at that, that's generally companies that are between 5 and let's say $250 million in revenue per year. Now, they both fit in that category. However, they lean on opposite ends of the spectrum. Odoo can handle companies that are making even less than $1 million per year, whereas NetSuite can handle companies that go well over 250 million. There are many companies that are over $1 billion in revenue successfully utilizing NetSuite. So they lean on opposite ends of the spectrum, but they are both firmly in that specific tier. So those are the things that these two products have in common. Let's now take a look at each one of these for their individual strengths and weaknesses. Taking up Odoo first, and obviously to give a proper analysis of the product, we're going to now pass it over to Andrew, who again runs the Odoo It Yourself YouTube channel, teaching people how to use Odoo. He's an expert on the subject, so let's pass it over to Andrew.
Thanks, Chris. So if you're shopping at the NetSuite level right now, Odoo probably isn't even on your radar yet. And I want to fix that because for a lot of companies, it's a system they should at least be looking at. And I'm like Chris, I'm not tied to any one company, even though I spend a lot of time in Odoo. So I'll give you an honest version, where it wins and where it genuinely doesn't. Let's start with the one that gets everybody's attention, cost. Odoo's per user cost can be as low as $20 per user with all their apps included. Now, most companies land closer to $50 per user these days, but that's still super low compared to most ERPs out there. And because Odoo is open source, you can even get a completely free version of Odoo if you don't mind living without some of the enterprise pieces. The second strength is Odoo's customizability and approachability. With Studio, Odoo's drag and drop tool for automation and customization, you can make a ton of changes yourself to make it fit your company's needs. This strength is one of the main reasons I call my channel Odoo It Yourself. For the third strength, and this is a big one that matters more than most people realize, there's no lock-in. Odoo's open source. You own your data, and you can self-host if you want to. That's close to the opposite of how enterprise ERP usually works. And if owning your own destiny matters to you, it's a big deal. Now let's talk about where Odoo falls short, because it definitely does in some areas. First, at the very high end, NetSuite is more mature. If you're doing complex multi-entity consolidation, advanced revenue recognition, or really heavy financial reporting, NetSuite has had decades to build that out, and it shows. Odoo can do a lot, but if that's your world, you should know NetSuite's deeper there as a base. You can get bolt-ons for Odoo to make that a little bit better, but NetSuite wins here. The second weakness is actually the same as the second strength, customizability. Odoo is very open, perhaps too open for some people. If you don't know what you're doing, you could easily mess up your system entirely. That's not to say you can't do it, you just need to be careful. And the third really ties into the second. Here's the biggest one, and it's the thing I'd actually warn you about the most. With Odoo, your biggest risk isn't the software, it's choosing who sets it up for you. The partner ecosystem is wildly uneven. Some are excellent, a lot are not, and a bad partner can sink an otherwise great project So if you do look at Odoo, the single most important decision you'll make isn't the software, it's who implements it. Get that right, and Odoo can be a fantastic fit for many companies. Anyway, those are my top strengths and weaknesses for Odoo. Back to you, Chris.
Awesome. Now, before I go any further, I should point out that one of the main weaknesses that Andrew brought up was the fact that there's an abundance of low quality Odoo consulting partners in that ecosystem. So if you are looking at getting an Odoo implementation, I highly recommend you reach out to Andrew. I will have his contact information down below. And if you're interested in learning more about Odoo, be sure to check out his YouTube channel, Odoo It Yourself. Moving on from that, let's now take a look at the NetSuite strengths and weaknesses. Starting off with the strengths, the first one is that NetSuite is unequivocally strong when it comes to accounting. It was originally called NetLedger back in the 90s, and since day one, it has been built with accounting and finance in mind. So regardless of whether it's journal entries, intercompany transactions, reconciliations, fixed asset management, revenue recognition, any one of these core accounting features and many more is very strong in the NetSuite system. Not to say that Odoo is weak on accounting, but there's no other ERP system in the small to mid-sized business tier that is as strong on this subject as NetSuite. The second strength I'll bring up is the fact that NetSuite is made to handle larger companies, especially ones that are intercompany, meaning they can have many different entities or subsidiaries, or multi-currency. So if you've got 5, 10, 15 or more currencies that you're dealing with as you sell products across many different continents or countries, then something like NetSuite can handle that very, very well. Now, Odoo does have the capabilities to do it, but as soon as you grow beyond a certain point and you start having, let's say, a dozen different subsidiaries and many different types of currencies you're dealing with across these subsidiaries, Odoo starts to struggle to be able to properly gather all the reporting information, handle these transactions, make sure that everything's being consolidated appropriately. But NetSuite is really made for this kind of thing, where it really shines when you're dealing with elaborate or larger multi-subsidiary companies. And then the third strength I should bring up is the depth of customization that you can get into with NetSuite. So again, Odoo has quite a lot of customization capabilities. It's modular. You can kind of pick and choose what you want and how you want to choose to configure it to your exact requirements. But NetSuite has been around for decades, and they simply have built in layers of complexity and customization that you just don't have available when you're dealing with Odoo. So there's many more use cases and systems built in place when you're using things like SuiteScript, workflows, etc., to tailor the system to your exact requirements. So those are the strengths. Let's now take a look at some of NetSuite's weaknesses. And the number one weakness, I would say, from my personal opinion, is the cost of the product. When you're looking at the small to mid-sized company tier, it's pretty hard to find another option that's more expensive than NetSuite. It definitely falls on the higher end of the spectrum, especially when you're considering it and comparing it against Odoo, which really falls on the lower end of the cost spectrum. So if you have two equivalent companies coming into it, granting that if they're both at a level where NetSuite is going to be acceptable for them and Odoo is going to be acceptable, generally speaking, you could end up paying anywhere from 2 to maybe even 4 times as much per year for NetSuite as you would end up paying for Odoo. So again, it comes with more capabilities. It doesn't have its strengths over Odoo, but there's no question you're going to end up paying more for NetSuite than its alternative. The second thing I should bring up is NetSuite's user interface. Now, there's a couple different aspects of this. One is the fact that as of right now, the UI you would deal with in NetSuite is what would be considered a bit more old school. It has an older look. It's a little bit more convoluted to navigate around in. They are coming out with a new version of the product in about a year called NetSuite Next, which has a more modern UI. It's a little bit easier to navigate around. It also has kind of an AI navigation chat feature built into the product itself. But again, that's coming out in about a year. That's not right now. So as of right now, Odoo is unquestionably more intuitive. It's definitely easier to get used to if you're brand new to one of these products, and it has a cleaner, more modern look to it. And then the third weakness of NetSuite is the difficulty to manage the software itself. So where Odoo has a bit more of a small business, just kind of manage it, be your own admin. I've seen people even try to implement Odoo on their own, which I don't necessarily recommend, but it can be done. You can watch YouTube videos like Andrew's and try to kind of navigate through customizing the system on your own. When it comes to NetSuite, although I've also seen people try that, the success rate is almost zero when it comes to NetSuite. It's very robust, it's very customizable, and thus it's much more complicated to properly implement NetSuite on your own. So it requires, you need a team, you need at least one consultant who knows what they're doing to make sure that the system is properly configured, just to make sure it does some of the basic functions in the system. We're not even talking about some of the more elaborate customizations that you can do. So do understand that trying to manage things on your own or do a successful implementation can come with a greater risk when you're dealing with NetSuite. So those are the strengths and weaknesses when comparing Odoo versus NetSuite. And now let's do a quick recap and pose some questions that you should be asking yourself to determine which product is going to be best for you. So first off, are you expanding rapidly, or do you anticipate that you are going to be expanding rapidly? That is an area where I would be looking more at NetSuite for that circumstance. Also, second question, are you an elaborate organization? You have pretty complex process flows to handle the way you run your business, or maybe not just elaborate, but you're also large. You're across many different countries or continents with lots of different currencies. Anything that gets more intricate, more complex, that's where you're going to be leaning in the direction of NetSuite. And then if you have budgetary concerns, or you know you're dealing with a very finite budget, not necessarily just for the software, but also the implementation, you're absolutely going to be looking more at something like Odoo. And then the last question I would ask myself is, do I have a small team, and likely to remain a small team in the near future, which presents you a circumstance where you cannot have necessarily a full-time ERP system administrator. You might have maybe your CEO is running the software system in the back, or you have your CFO or your controller is the person who's also running the system. Well, in that circumstance, you're going to want to look at something like Odoo, which is more user-friendly, it's easier to get used to, and it's also easier to customize for new users, something more manageable to maintain for a small team. So those are the things I would keep in mind if I'm trying to determine which of these two products is best for me. All right, and that about wraps up this video. I'd like to give a shout out again to Andrew and thank him for assisting me in making this video. And ultimately, if you are undecided, not just on Odoo versus NetSuite, but amongst all the different ERPs, you can't decide which one is best for your business, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'll have a link for my contact form down below, and I do give free short consultations to try to help companies determine which software will be best for them. Ultimately, if you found this video enlightening, please hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and with all that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.